Can he solve it in 24 hours? President-elect Trump thinks he can. Ukraine's been fighting off the Russian invasion for over 2.5 years. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians and Russians, civilians and military, are dead. Just last night, a drone attack on Odessa, 1 killed and another 13 injured. Today, the EU's foreign minister visits Kyiv for a commemoration and a statement of reassurance amid uncertainty over whether the new president will continue US support for the war.
The clear purpose of this visit is to stress the European Union support to Ukraine. This support remains unwavering. This support is absolutely needed for you to continue defending yourself against Russia's aggression.
Another nation of concern for Mr. Trump, Iran. Today, a foreign ministry spokesman there said that the claim of a foiled assassination attempt on the president-elect was nothing to do with the Iranian government. He called it a repulsive plot by Israel and opposition groups outside the country to complicate matters between the US and Iran. An Iranian man was charged yesterday in the US in connection with the alleged plan. A packed foreign policy agenda, then, for Donald Trump. For now, though, this is the man still in charge, for the next 11 weeks anyway. And thank goodness for Marine One. It's just a short hop from the White House to his beachside retreat in Rehoboth, Delaware. The perfect place for the president to cocoon from a cacophony of recriminations from senior Democrat figures. Just a few days ago, when our correspondent caught up with her, the former Speaker Nancy Pelosi saved her vitriol for the winner.
Of course, I'm very disappointed.
And another 4 years of Donald Trump?
I don't want to even talk about him today.
But now the tables are turned on her own side.
The anticipation was that if the president were to step aside, that there would be an open primary. Because the president endorsed Kamala Harris immediately, that really made it almost impossible to have a primary.
While wounds are being licked in Democrat circles, here at the Trump resort in West Palm Beach, Florida, the new president-elect mulls how to populate his new administration. As for policy, from day one, expect to see more scenes like this. 300 people deported last night after being detained at the US-Mexican border arrive in Guatemala.
We are not going to steal. We suffer from poverty here in our country. We now ask Donald Trump to give us the opportunity. We are going with the desire to work.
This appeal to the new president's largesse, alongside that of European countries supporting Ukraine, does seem likely to go unfulfilled.
Well, let's speak to Matt Terrell, who was Chief of Staff for Marco Rubio's campaign for the Republican presidential nomination. Senator Rubio is tipped by some to become President Trump's foreign policy chief as Secretary of State. Matt Terrell, while the world awaits news from Mar-a-Lago about what Trump's second administration might look like, what do you expect?
Well, I would expect that he will deliver on the items that he campaigned on as president, particularly the big issues that voters voted on. Namely on the economy, inflation, and border security. I think you're likely to see him push forward on where he left off on many policies during his first term, such as, for example, picking up on the 2017 tax cuts that he implemented. Those are coming up for renewal. Reinstoring Title 42, Remain in Mexico policy. Those are a few of the things that he just talked about on the campaign trail. And look, if you look at why he won this race, if you look at all the issues that voters cared about, namely is on the economy, inflation, and border security, I'd expect him to start off with those issues day one of his administration.
Right. Obviously, all the big domestic issues, as you'd expect. But is there a chance that all these overseas conflicts that we've been talking about so far in the programme might blow him off course from all that?
Well, There's certainly no question that he's going to have to address the conflict with Ukraine and Russia, Middle East policy. And as he talked about on the campaign trail, look, he has no intentions of starting any new wars. There's a big theme that he campaigned on, championed throughout the campaign. So look, I think we're at to kind of wait and see here in terms of exactly what he will do. But the biggest thing he leaned into was bringing people to the negotiation table. And I think a lot of Americans will look at that and say, well, he did that with North Korea. In his first term, he met with the North Korean leader, was working to bring people to the negotiation table. I think as we look to Ukraine and Russia in particular, the Middle East in particular, I think we're at to wait and see how that all takes shape. But certainly that came up during the campaign. Americans want to see peace, prosperity, not just at home, but abroad. And you can expect him to take on those issues, I think, certainly day one as well.
Well, he's talked about ending the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. I mean, doesn't that really mean surrendering to Putin effectively?
Well, no, I think what you're going to see here is what he does. And I think right now we're going to just wait and see, frankly, what he does once he's actually in office. But I think right now you're looking to see him focusing on putting together his foreign policy team, not just his domestic team. You saw him move forward with announcing his chief of staff. So at this stage right now, it's getting the right people in place. The president certainly matters, but having a great team, not just for your domestic policy, but a great team that can advance your foreign policy, that's going to matter as well. The biggest thing that he talked about was bring people to the negotiation table. I think we're just have to wait and see what he does with respect to once he's sworn in.
So your old boss, Marco Rubio, likely to be Secretary of State? Do you think that would be a good hire?
We'll see what happens. Certainly, Senator Rubio is a very talented individual. There's a lot of talented individuals that are being mentioned for various positions within the administration. I think right now you're going to see an and not or approach by President-elect Trump and his team, bringing people in who maybe served in the first term and adding new people to his administration who never served in the first term. Some folks from government, Capitol Hill potentially, but also I think a lot of individuals from the private sector as well. I think you're going to see a diverse group of individuals brought to the table here, brought into the administration. It's his decision on whether or not he announces Senator Rubio or anybody else to positions, but certainly Senator Rubio is a very talented individual. We'll see what he does across the board on various roles.
We talked about Ukraine. There's horrific images coming out of Gaza overnight as well. Do you think that, some worry that Trump will really give Israel a blank check in the Middle East? Do you think that is a concern?
Well, again, I hate to be redundant here. I honestly think we're just to wait and see. I say that because there's not a whole lot of details yet with respect to what will be done there. What President-elect Trump has championed is wanting to end wars, not starting any new wars. And again, I go back to really leaning into the negotiation table here. He has made a promise to the American people on these issues. The big things have to deliver on them. So I just think right now we will get more clarity once he's sworn in. Again, not to be repetitive here, I do think the biggest thing right now is getting the right people in place to help him advance his foreign policy agenda.
Do you think he's got an eye on the Nobel Peace Prize?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Do you think he's got an eye on the Nobel Peace Prize?
Oh, we'll see. You'd have to ask President Trump that, but I think, I think Americans recognize that there was a comparing and contrasting right now in this past election. And there's a unique opportunity for Americans to look at, not what we just did in the domestic elements of his first term, but during the election, Americans looked at his foreign policy elements and recognized that this was a president, whether you like President Trump or not, this was a president who did not start any new wars. Again, this is somebody who's campaigning on peace. Again, it's one thing to campaign on that. It's another thing to deliver on that. That's what he needs to do. I think Americans who voted for him in particular are confident he will.